Anyways, we'll kick off Trace.
He goes. Now in partnership with the new Westport Library and Quick Center for the Arts and iTunes, it's Oh Brother, Not Another Podcast with me, Trace Burrows.
And me, Mick Burrows, and our guests are Holly Gordon and Ward Hooper, both fine artists who have an amazing story to tell and a book that tells it. And I guess we should thank, and my good friend David Wilk has something to do with that. What did David Wilk, what was his part in this, getting you guys?
What was his part in it? My goodness.
Yes.
Well, he was absolutely the structure. David started out as our book packager. And after he had found a wonderful opportunity with a publishing company who had us just dangling on a string for so unbelievably long time, he suggested that we try Plan B and go with an imprint that he has, City Point Press, that would be distributed by Simon and Schuster. And he became our publisher.
Oh.
And he has been incredibly instrumental and supportive in this endeavor in bringing our story to light. And he connected us to you guys.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, that was great. No, I know David's a good friend, and our parents were friends with his parents. His mother was a fine artist. Did you know his mother, Barbara Wilk, was a fine artist?
Oh, yeah. No.
And his father, Max Wilk, was a screenwriter and a novelist. Anyway.
Well, a lot of it runs in our DNA.
Yes, it does.
So tell us how you two got together. Like, how did this all come about, this book and the concept?
Well, you know, the crazy thing is there was this freelance writer. Her name is Elise Perlman, and unfortunately she passed away in August. But many years back, she had written about Ward and his art, and she wrote about me and my art. And in case you don't know it, I'm a chatterbox. And she and I just would have these conversations that were so perceptive. They're just incredibly deep. And one day she asked me if I knew of the Northport painter, Ward Hooper.
And she asked me the same thing. Right.
I didn't. I had never heard of Ward, but I checked him out on social media. See, she had thought that there were similarities in our art style, in our light, and our color, and our subject matter that were similar, but we didn't know each other. No. So I checked Ward on Facebook, and he posted this painting, Long Island City, which immediately made me think of something I had created many years earlier, but was so different from anything I had ever done that it just sat on my Drobo, and I posted it. And
so I saw a similarity in structure immediately by way of verticals and strong horizontals. And it was I did the Long Island painting series from my commuting days from Northport to my office. I got off in Long Island City, and I always liked that. I did a whole series of commuting paintings, and that was the end of the commute in Long Island City. And we'd get up and go over to Prattville and take the subway 2 stops to the city. But it was, that's what I posted to Holly, and she responded with hers. I said, oh, how interesting by way of structure and composition. I said, this is really interesting. So I continued and
then, but just hang on. The interesting thing with this that we didn't even realize, I was also a commuter to NYU. And as my husband would be driving, I would be sketching or photographing. So living in our parallel lives, we were doing similar things. And then Ward was teaching at the Art League and posted a demo painting that he did of 3 tulips. And it's right after he did the Long Island City. And I was getting ready to do a solo show on tulips. And so I posted that to say, hey, look, you have tulips, I have tulips.
We should mention before David.
Interesting. Yeah.
Well, I just want to mention the name of the book before David. I don't want David to get mad at me. So it's Parallel Perspectives: The Brush Lens Collaboration.
Where can people find it?
Yeah. Is that and it's published by who now? Did you say?
It's published by City Point Press. It's distributed by Simon & Schuster.
Okay.
You can get it on Amazon, on the indie books. They're on it in Target. It's like it is all over the place.
It's out there.
That's great.
But the neatest thing is there is a local independent bookstore called Book Review in Huntington, and they did our initial launch. And Ward and I have been up there on 2 occasions autographing copies of the book.
We did 2 book signings, so that was terrific. They were really wonderfully hospitable, and we did a Zoom meeting with them, and they couldn't have been nicer.
They have hosted every famous author you could possibly imagine. And the crazy thing was, on October 8th, when they did our book launch, which unfortunately had to be virtual, they had just interviewed the woman who became the Nobel Prize for her poetry. So they did her earlier in the day, and we were following her.
Nice. Yeah, no, I should just mention most of this will be heard on our audio podcast on iTunes. But for those of you who want to see the artist and see the art that we're going to show in a little while, they can go to youtube.com/MigsB, /MigsB, MIGGSB, and you can see them as well as hear us all. But anyway, for now, so we have, well, the other kind of coincidence or overlap is a lot of your work there's similarities, and you were inspired by Arthur Dove, who lived in Westport for a while. I don't know if you knew that.
He did.
Yeah, Arthur Dove lived in Westport for a few years. Yep.
These parallel universes that they're just so unbelievably interwoven.
Yeah, and
68, that's when Helen Tor passed away. But we are okay. So a friend had said to me, a colleague had suggested, he was so excited with what Ward and I began doing, because after the tulips were shared on Facebook, Ward said, let's meet. And then he started taking me to all of these locations on the island that had inspired him many years.
He lives on the South Shore, I'm North Shore. So this was new territory for Howie. I'm in Northport.
So Ward is showing me all of, he's got me so excited in my creativity. It just erupted. I told him, I said, it's like a tsunami of creativity. And after several weeks, Ward started painting again, which was terrific because he hadn't been painting for so long. So he was inspired to visit places that he hadn't seen for a while. He got excited by my response to things, and then he started painting.
Well, this goes back many years ago. I had friends in Northport, Andrew Geller, famous architect, and his wife Shirley, and another friend, and we would go painting every Sunday. And so we did this for 7 years. So I had a library of places on Long Island to visit, that I'd done years ago. And after we painted on those Sunday sessions, we had long lunches and a lot of wine and conversation. And those were wonderful, wonderful days. So that's what I did with Holly. I took her out to those former painting locations and reunited and started painting again. That was
I'm going to read a quote. I want to read one quote. A quote.
Inspiration.
I want to read a quote from the book because it ties in with what you just said.
Sure.
This is from Ward. It says, "Even when Holly is not behind the wheel, she is the driving force of our journey, and I'm holding on for dear life, but having the time of my life." Pretty spectacular for someone who thought his life was over, wouldn't you say? And to know that my life as a painter has been such an inspiration to Holly to go forward, blazing a new trail with her art, adds to my satisfaction that I give her fuel, support, and encouragement, and I love to keep going forward. So.
Yes.
Every Tuesday, because that was the day that we had set aside to get together, Ward would have a list of where he was going to navigate me to.
I was a navigator, Harry.
I was the driver and he was the navigator. And it was amazing. So I would be sharing all of our stories and artwork with this colleague. And he just said to me, he says, you know, Holly, what you and Ward are doing is so extraordinary. And there is such a history of art on Long Island. Why don't you see how you could tie what you're doing in with art history on Long Island? Well, as soon as he said that to me, it was like, of course, Arthur Dove and Helen Tour. So I say this to Ward one day. And he said, oh, I could take you to the Dove Tour cottage. And 3 minutes later, we were there.
It's nearby. And Holly knew more about Arthur Dove and Helen Tour than I did, and said, wow, this is a great discovery.
So people don't know, how would you describe Arthur Dove? Was he considered, did he kind of in the forefront of abstraction or what? How would you describe his work?
He was, okay, well, first of all, he and Helen Tour were another collaborative couple, and they inspired and influenced each other. They're both early 20th century American artists, and there are many.
He was considered the earliest, one of the earliest impressionists.
There are many historians who call Arthur Dove the first early American abstract artist. But the interesting thing with Arthur Dove was I started doing more serious research on him. And I don't want to spook you guys out, but
Yes.
there were works that I had created that were remarkably similar, and they're in the book, to Arthur Dove's work. And then I found this painting called Untitled No. 2 Centerport of sailboats, the subject, the theme, that was remarkably similar to Ward's race day. And that clinched it.
Yeah, those were amazing similarities.
I'm going to try to share my screen if this will work so we can see it. Yeah, it is, again, because we're an audio podcast, but it just so no, it doesn't seem to
but
be.
even if we're audio, this could encourage people. It's like if you go, it's on Barnes and Noble too, that book. But if you go to the Amazon site, there are so many pages that could be flipped through.
Yeah,
people to see before they purchase it.
Can you see your book now? Okay, so we're going to try to go through quickly and get to the Arthur Dove painting. But the amazing, I don't know that we even mentioned that Holly's a photographer and Ward's the painter, which we talked about. But sometimes I went through this book and I could not tell who did what because they're so, Holly's work is very painterly and they're both.
That's a wonderful similarity.
Well, see, we had what Ward and I have done is create allies between confluence between painting and photography, whereas historically they're viewed
There,
as
you were just hitting on
as
what we were
adversarial.
discussing about, right?
Yeah, there's the tulips. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the other thing is, I mean, I have a very intensive art background, and I have always been a painter. But in 1993 or 1992, when I was studying with Richard W. Brown at Maine Photography Workshop, he told me to stop painting because if I was serious about my photography, he said creativity is finite. So I stopped painting. And somehow, when Ward and I got back together again, all of my painterly stuff just started coming out. And rather than using a brush or a palette knife, it's my mouse or my stylus.
Mm.
But even when I look through my viewfinder, I select my focus for colors and shapes to blend together.
So we
I've
thought we
always
think
been
alike
impressionistic.
the way we approach our subject matter. I'm looking for, I'm not looking at houses, or I'm looking at interesting shapes and what inspires me, and begin from there.
So do you, when you went out to create stuff for the book, do you like, when do you suggest like this house with some flowers, whatever you're looking at that you really like, and then you both decide to do it, you paint it, and
No,
how
it didn't work. It didn't work like that.
Oh.
It didn't work like that at all. The first time I visited Ward, I had said to myself, I said, Holly, don't overwhelm him with your exuberance. Just let him lead the way. Well, Ward lives in this humongous house, and on every
The converted barn.
on every flat surface, there were stacks of paintings. And as he is showing me these paintings that he had created years ago, I'm saying to him and saying to myself, I have a photograph like that. I have an image like that. I have an image like that. So when I went back to see him the following week, I brought back prints that I had already created that were similar in concept, similar in subject matter, similar in color and shape to works that he had. So even before we started working together, we had a stack of art that was compatible. That's what was so unreal. And then
similarities,
and then when
structure and color and subject matter.
And then when Ward started taking me to these locations, I responded to them in my own way. So by the time the idea gelled, because we were already collaborating for 3 years before there were any thoughts to have our story be made into a book. And the idea of doing this came from people who saw our exhibits, attended our talks, and were just so enthralled by what we were doing and by our relationship that they said, gee, you ought to do a book. You ought to do a book. So I just collected everything together, and a colleague suggested that I send it out to the renowned designer, Bonnie Bryant, who had designed a book that this colleague had published, just to get a feeler and see what she thought about it. And she was absolutely overwhelmed. I could not believe that such an important designer
wonderful response.
would get back to us so quickly and say, yes, the ethos is wonderful and the artwork is incredible. And she suggested doing a book proposal because publishers like their own thumbprint on vinyl products. So it just all meshed together.
Did she send, as Trace sort of asked, did she send you out on assignments and said, look, the two of you go out and both capture that lighthouse, or did you ever do simultaneous? You never did that?
See, no, she didn't do anything of the kind.
We
What she
supplied the
did was
material.
weave
Oh.
together the material that we sent her. And what is so, see, this is what is so incredible about our story. Ward painted lighthouses. I photographed them. Now, I didn't even photograph them by choice, but a photographer friend and I would take these road trips. He loved lighthouses. And I just figured, well, there they
My
are.
folks came
I'll
from
photograph
Eastport,
them.
Maine, the last town on the coast of Maine. So I knew the coast of Maine very well and loved lighthouses. Always have. Wonderful
But
subjects.
there are some pictures in the book that look like you were both there at the same time. I
But
mean,
we weren't.
they're
See,
so
that's-
similar.
Yeah.
It's
That is-
amazing.
That is what is just so serendipitous about us.
Now, the other aspect to your story, which is kind of bittersweet, I mean, mostly sweet, I guess, but I mean, you both lost spouses, and then you met each other, which kind of got you out of your, despair, I guess.
Absolutely.
And was that
Right. Yeah. Very important. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that
Holly sparked me to pick up a paintbrush again, which I hadn't done for a long while, and been at it ever since.
now, do you live in separate places and towns? I mean, is there?
I'm on the North Shore of Long Island, Northport.
And I'm on the
Little
South Shore.
town where the Main Street goes right down to the harbor, if you're familiar with it. Looks across to Connecticut, and Holly lives on the other side of the island. So this was new territory for Holly when I drove her, or she drove, and I guided her from painting location. It was all new locations. These were hills, and Holly's side of the island was all flat. So this was a wonderful new venture and scenes for Holly.
See, when my husband died 20 some years ago, I sort of clung to my camera to keep me afloat, and I would travel. In fact, one of my sons had said, "You're just like the first page in Herman Melville's Moby Dick. When I'm walking down the street and I want to knock the hat off of everyone I meet, I know it's time to go to sea." And I just started traveling all over the world. And I was doing this to stay positive and focused on how wonderful life is and not lose myself in my loss and total change of life. And in so doing, there was no idea, there was no plan for where my photography, where my art would lead. It just was, I just cast myself onto this raft, and the waves were taking me up and down. And all along the way, people first got interested in my butterflies, and that's what attracted media attention and exhibits to it. That I exhibited Antarctica and Galapagos and my butterflies in the New York Hall of Science, and I got invited up to Magic Wings in Massachusetts, and I went down to Antarctica because I've just had this need to travel and do different things while I was trying to figure out the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. And became a Kodak partner. Now my Galapagos and Antarctica are in the Malloy College Permanent Collection. I've always had this environmental bent, which is similar to that which Arthur Dove has had. I mean, both Ward and I are so inspired and enthralled by the landscape and by nature. It's it's just been an unbelievable ride.
Did you really, well, speaking of rides, did you describe that? I think when you were maybe a little girl or late, you used to spin the globe and just
Yes.
put is that really the way you?
Yes.
And you would just go?
This is what is so crazy. Okay, first of all, we had this Mercator projection map that you pull down like a window shade, and it flattened everything out, and Antarctica was right along the bottom of the map, just spread out. And I'm thinking, because I'm little, I'm second grade, third grade, and I'm thinking, if the universe is a square, it's got to be very dark in these corners. But what's on the other side of the corners? And then I would go and I would spin the globe and close my eyes and put my finger on a spot. And then I would see where the finger landed. And then I would go and research it. And one day I took the globe and I just flipped it upside down. And my God, there was Antarctica spread out. It was just nothing short of extraordinary. So when I graduated from teaching, because I don't like to say retired, in 1999, I made it a goal to be in an unusual location when 1999 became 2000. And I was, and a friend went with me and she was concerned about Y2K. And I just laughed and said, hey, if there's a problem with computers, we'll be in Antarctica longer.
I'm just, Antarctica, my vision of it is just a big, huge, flat, freezing cold surface.
Bleak, yeah.
Are there buildings? Is there like a,
building?
There?
Well, first of all, there are a few refugios left over from the days of the whalers and the explorers. It is the most mountainous, windiest place on Earth. Yeah. There's nothing. There's a lot of penguins. There's a lot of guano. There are some relics. It's not flat.
Yeah.
Most of the surface is covered with ice and snow. The thing is, and this is what you should look at my Antarctica journey to the extreme on my website, because it'll give you information about it, even though I don't have the work anymore. In its summer, there's practically 24 hours of daylight. It's cast in pitch blackness for 8 or 9 months of the year. But I went during the summer, because the spring into summer, because I wanted to see the penguin chicks. I didn't want to see the eggs. I wanted to see the chicks. And I went for the penguins, but I got blown away by the landscape, because the air is so clear, even with the drifting down of pollution from the Northern Hemisphere. It is unbelievable. The clarity, the fragility, it's a paradise.
Where do you stay? Is there a Motel 6 up there? Where do you stay?
There's nothing. When we would disembark our ship, I was with Lindblad Expeditions.
Lindblad from Westport too, by the way. Another coincidence.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Eric Lars Lindblad.
There's a Lindblad Cove. Mm-hmm. And the first Lindblad was the first eco tour director. And my husband and I had sailed with them down the coast in Alaska as part of a month-long trip that we spent there in 1993. So after he passed away and I started traveling again, I just decided I wanted to go. I wanted to travel with Lindblad. But anyway, we would have these tags, and they would be flipped on this board. We would get into the panga to be taken to whatever landing area. And there were no docks, there were no piers. a wave did wash over me and I lost one of my camera bodies, but it was exciting. And the insurance company said, we never had a claim from Antarctica before. But the thing is, on this one outing, and we all had red parkas, I was following these penguins, and it was hard to walk because of the depth of the snow and the ice. So I would tread very slowly. And all of a sudden, I looked around and there was nobody, no red. I didn't know which way to go. I was in such a panic that everybody was going to get back onto the Panga, go flip their coins on the ship. And that was going to be the end of it because there was nothing. There is a building. It's interesting. It's a post office. It's from England. It's the British, in the lowest part of the world, an active post office that is open during tourist season, which is just for a few months. And during World War II, it was a spy headquarters, and it fell into disrepair. And the Gen 2 penguins took it over, but it kind of got cleaned up a little bit, and it's just an interesting tourist place.
Oh, wow. Well, there's a George Clooney movie, Midnight Sky, which is,
Oh my God. Yeah, I just saw that.
Takes place on, well, we're just got a minute left.
Okay.
I do want to just repeat again, so give David Wilk a plug and say the book is called Parallel Perspectives, the Brush Lens Collaboration by Holly Gordon and Ward Hooper. And I have just one last question, if it's not too nosy. So how would you describe your relationship? I mean, are you best friends? Is it a little more than that? I mean, you live apart, but are you?
A lot more than that.
Okay.
I don't really think there are words to describe the relationship that Ward and I have. It's just
Came
so
together when we both needed each other, and that's ongoing. It's been a truly creative journey together, and on we go. I always say, Holly, on we go.
Wow, that's great. That's a great way to end. On we go. Yep. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Fascinating.
It's great, and everyone can look for the book, Parallel Perspectives. Just Google it, and you'll find it on Amazon or anywhere.
Yeah, and the neat thing too is this Elise Perlman. She's the one who came up with the title, Parallel Perspectives. And sadly, she's not here to enjoy and appreciate it, but she knows all about our journey.
We're indebted to
Elise.
Great legacy, though. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you much.
Take care.